Welcome to another week 2 of Hawkeyed with me, Dave O'Hara. Thanks for tuning in. If you'll notice, our background's a little different this week. We're getting ready for a new background in the next few weeks with our logo, Hawkeyed with me, Dave O'Hara, and my website information, daveoharasports.com. But I also wanted to tell you folks as well, I really appreciate all the comments, liking, subscribing, rate, review. Please continue to spread the word on this show. We love bringing it to you. Today's show is no different than our usual one last week, and if you missed any part of that, again, as I mentioned, or past episodes in the future, please go to daveoharasports.com or via social media at Dave O'Hara Sports. Our YouTube link is right there, so you can watch it right there if you don't DVR it or watch it as it's airing on TV. Of course, you know the Iowa Hawkeyes are going to win tonight, we hope, as this airs right after the Iowa-Minnesota game, so hopefully we're correct in all our predictions. But joining me today will be Joe Merschman briefly, and then David Eickholt, and then we'll roll into segment 2 with James Vandenberg, former Hawkeye quarterback, and Jeff Horner, former Iowa Hawkeye men's basketball great and current coach at Truman State, will join us to close out the show in segment 3. And as you can see, I've located Joe Merschman. Joe, first and foremost, as always, is president and CEO of Merschman Seeds. I know you're a busy guy, so I'll get right to it. How's everything going with you, Joe, and what are your thoughts?
Well, things are going well. You know, it's harvest is over, tillage is going on, fertilizer going on, farmers are getting ready for next year's crop, markets are up. It's a pretty good time to be on the farm. And, of course, don't forget to order the seed, right?
Yeah, that's right. Now, how about the Hawkeyes? Your thoughts?
Well, I think Floyd's going to stay home.
I like that. The Florida Rosedale Trophy going to be coming from the game tonight and going to go to the Iowa Hawkeyes in Iowa City and stay there. I love it, Joe. Thank you, my friends, so much. We hope for Hawkeye victories. We're going to talk some Hawkeye basketball with you in the future, as well as David Eickholt right now. But thanks so much, Joe. We'll look forward to catching up with you next week, my friend.
Thanks, Dave. See you next week.
And as you can see, I've located David Eickholt. And David, first and foremost, before I say thanks for joining us and great predictions last week, David is the HawkeyeInsider.com. Why? Because he is the Hawkeye Insider. All the feedback I got offline and online, David, last week, on my phone, on social, you nailed it, man. You gave us 4 keys to last week's game. He is at David Eickholt via Twitter, at Hawkeyes on 24/7 via Twitter, or HawkeyeInsider.com. David, as always, first and foremost, thanks for joining me. And secondly, I'd ask how everything's going, but I know you nailed it. 4-0. Hawkeyes' big 49-7 victory last week over Michigan State. Take it away.
You know, every dog has his day. So last weekend was a pretty good day for me, Dave. But yeah, Iowa came out with a spark. They came out angry. They played with confidence. I think that opening drive was absolutely massive for Spencer Petras and that offense. And I think that Iowa's first play of scrimmage from that second half, Dave, when Tyler Goodson broke that 71-yard run, I think that's when you saw the lights really begin to flicker on, because Iowa in third quarters, Dave, in Big Ten play, they hadn't scored a Big Ten touchdown in the third quarter in the last 6 games. So to be able to kind of break that apart, I think was a huge monkey off their back. And I think Iowa is going in with supreme confidence against a Minnesota team that has a lackluster defense, to say the least.
Well, you covered it all. In-state star back in the day in high school from the Des Moines area, Rocky Lombardi. You talked about Iowa. One of your predictions was Iowa putting pressure on him. And man, did Zach Van Valkenburg and Davion Nixon did that, and the rest of the defense with turnovers. And then your other prediction was Tyrone Tracy with a big day. Tyler Goodson over 100 yards. And then, of course, you talked about Charlie Jones. That's what most of the comments I got from the viewers were like, who's this number 16? Man, that Eickholt guy nailed it. So, David, you're resting on your laurels. You got 4 out of 4 this last week. So I'm going to put your feet to the fire. As this goes out over the air, I'm going to make a bold prediction. And the Iowa Hawkeyes have already sunk the boat as P.J. Fleck and his Minnesota Gophers are trying to row that boat. I'm saying Iowa's already won. So when this airs after the Iowa victory, hopefully on Friday night, what is your prediction? What are your points going into the game? And again, this will be on after the game, after the Hawkeye victory. And Floyd of Rosedale is going to stay in Iowa City, as Joe Merschman said.
Yeah, I think my first bold prediction for the game, Dave, Emir Smith-Marsette's going to have a kick return touchdown. Minnesota, over the last couple of years, has really struggled in the special teams. They have a very big lapse of giving up either big punt returns, kick returns, botched field goals. That's become a Minnesota specialty. Even last year when they were a really, really good team, ended up, I think, top 10 or top 12, they still really struggle on special teams. Number 2, slow down running back Mohamed Ibrahim from Minnesota. He leads the nation with 190 rushing yards per game. He has 10 touchdowns through 3 games. I mean, he is an absolutely dynamic back. And I think that I'm going to say it again. Tyler Goodson goes over 125 yards. Minnesota's defense is dead last right now in the Big Ten. Iowa coming off their most complete game of the season. I think that offense is oozing with confidence right now. The offensive line played their best game of the year. And Tyler Goodson, I think, is incredibly fired up to go out and have a big game. Because, Dave, remember, Tyler Goodson's first career start was against Minnesota last year, and he had a very, very effective game then as well.
David, we're excited. We're going to talk about a Hawkeye victory next week. I just can feel it. 2-2 in the Big Ten. We'll say it already. Now let's go to basketball in the last minute and a half we have with you for this week. So much to discuss. 7 teams in the top 25 AP. Again, full disclosure, we're recording this show on Tuesday afternoon. It's airing Friday night, or if you see it online later. Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois in the top 10 at 5, 7, and 8. And then we've got, like I said, 7 in the top 25 for Big Ten teams. Iowa at number 5, Gonzaga at number 1. David, that December 19th game looms larger and larger.
It really does, Dave. And I was a little bit surprised Iowa was number 5. I put them number 5 in my preseason rankings about an hour before the actual rankings came out. But I was very surprised to see a lot of the national analysts buy into Iowa. I think the hype is absolutely well-deserved. But there's still a lot of, good questions about the defense, which obviously is the biggest thing. Mm-hmm. But they have a lot of firepower coming back. Gonzaga at number 1 is no surprise. If Iowa takes care of business and Gonzaga can either go undefeated or just lose one game going into that, it's a very, very real possibility. We're going to have a top 5 matchup between Iowa and Gonzaga December 19th at 11 a.m. The team doubled down. Fran doubled down on them. They're incredibly excited. So we'll, 15 days away.
Cannot wait, David. It is getting there closer and closer. And the cool news to that is, besides playing North Carolina, besides playing Iowa State, we could go on and on. And again, check out David's work online at David Eickholt via Twitter or HawkeyeInsider.com. So much more basketball. Fran McCaffrey had a presser this week. Kirk Ferentz did. We've got it all covered right there. He's Hawkeye Insider David Eickholt. David, I'll look forward to catching up with you next week, my friend. Great stuff from you as always.
Hey, thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
My pleasure as always. Back with more, and James Vandenberg and Jeff Horner in just a few moments with Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara.
One word means more to farmers than any other: yield. Nobody knows this better than your friend in the field, Merschman Seeds. With industry-leading seed treatments like Trepidity ST, you'll see faster emergence and more bushels per acre. Become a part of the Merschman family and see the difference in your field. Ask your dealer for superiority. Merschman Seeds.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara, and pleased to have this guy join us. You see him on the screen. He's James Vandenberg. He's part of CorridorInvestmentGroup.com, part of the RBC Wealth Management team with Billy Happel Jr., former Iowa Hawkeye wide receiver, and we got the quarterback here, James Vandenberg, former quarterback for the University of Iowa Hawkeyes, won a state title with the Keokuk Chiefs in 2007-2008 season, his senior year at Keokuk High School. James still holds passing records in the state of Iowa, folks, so he still brings quite a reputation with him. Again, stellar career at the University of Iowa, and now, as I mentioned, part of that Corridor Investment Group with Billy Happel Jr., part of RBC Wealth Management. So, James, all the feedback I got online. Well, first of all, thanks for joining us as always, and I'm glad you told me off the air everything's going well with you, so let's get right to it. I got to gloat on you a little bit. All the feedback I got on social media, all the friends I've gotten phone calls and texts, and they said, you and Vandy nailed it. And I said, well, of course, James made me look good, and I took credit, but you called it, my friend. You said I would not want to face an 0-2 Hawkeye team. So I'm going to step aside and let you kind of bask in the glow here of your great predictions. So again, thanks for joining us, and let's talk about that big 49-7 Hawkeye victory over Michigan State last week.
I don't know if you should declare me Nostradamus just yet, but I think when you look at the first 2 weeks, we're not that far away from winning. We found a way to lose those games or maybe not win those games, but we were playing close with what I could see, quality football teams. So we weren't as far away as people probably would have thought. I think Michigan State comes off winning against Michigan. Maybe they're higher than normal, but either way, it was a classic Hawkeye victory where defense, offense, special teams, everything clicked. I think you had a lot of guys stand out on both sides of the ball, and it led to a game that got out of hand pretty quick.
I think the intriguing thing to a couple of things you said and what you mentioned last week that really got my attention while watching the game, and a lot of David Eickholt, who's on before you and was on last week for our Hawkeye Insider, for Hawkeyes on 24/7 via Twitter, or at David Eickholt via Twitter. He's the HawkeyeInsider.com, and it was interesting that all the predictions he made, and one of them was get pressure on Rocky Lombardi. And you mentioned about being an in-state kid from Des Moines. Rocky Lombardi came in to play his home state team in the Iowa Hawkeyes, and pressured him they did with Van Valkenburg and Nixon. What a defense they threw at him. And yeah, I know a lot was made about, well, his left knee's a little dinged up and is he playing 100% healthy? But James, you've been in a Big Ten pocket as you're smiling. You know what it's like when it's collapsing around you. They didn't give him much room to breathe, did they?
Yeah, no, they didn't. And that brings anybody back to earth. From Tom Brady to an 8th grade quarterback, when you are constantly running for your life or feeling guys bumped into you or picking yourself up after you throw the ball, it wears on you. And it forces you to make bad decisions, which I think was pretty apparent. I mean, having that kind of pressure can completely change a game. And there's super special guys in the game like the Russell Wilsons that can work through that pressure and find a way around it. But most of us, me, myself, definitely included, we don't have the athletic ability to get away from it. It wears you down. You start seeing things, you start feeling things. And I think that clearly was what was going on Saturday.
And, James, a couple of other interesting points you brought up last week, but you and I were talking off the air a little bit here. And full disclosure, again, viewers, we're recording this on Tuesday, so obviously you're watching this after hopefully a big Hawkeye victory Friday night against Minnesota at Minnesota. It was on FS1 earlier tonight, so hopefully you're enjoying a big Hawkeye victory on your Friday night football. But, James, I got to mention to you, when you talk about playing in the Big Ten, playing at Iowa with all the rigors of being a quarterback at Iowa in the Big Ten. You watched Rick Stanzi do it very well for a long time, and then you came in and did it well. You see the maturation that Spencer Petras is going to go through. But I think the one thing I wanted to highlight with you as well, they're still talking about the lack of touch. A lot of the broadcasters, a lot of the analysts, the lack of touch and I see you smiling, so you've obviously heard a lot about this. And so you and I talked about that briefly last week, but I want you to talk about that a little bit, but then also talk about the number of passes, and you threw 50 passes one game. Well, now he only threw 27 passes this week, and you made a couple of off-the-air comments I'd like you to bring on the air. First, about his touch or lack thereof, Spencer Petras's, but also how successful the Hawkeyes, Kirk Ferentz, Brian Ferentz have been in running the offense this way. So I'll step out of the way and let you take some time to go into that, please.
Yeah, I think overall, when you look at what happened on Saturday, I think you just saw us clicking in a lot of different facets of the offense, and both passing the ball, running the ball, and then you can flip over to defense and special teams. But there's a formula at Iowa, and we're best when we play well in all three phases, and offense is a huge part of that. But I don't think you could ever probably just point at pass the ball more, pass the ball less as being the right reason. I think in general, when we run the ball balanced with our passing attack, it opens it up. I think we tend to be schemed to be able to do that really well. I don't necessarily think we're the best when we're like Texas Tech, which we're not. As far as the heat or the hot balls, I think people got to be patient. There's going to be a maturation process here. What I look at when I see him throw the ball, he has the ability to put touch on it. I think he throws a great down the field ball. I think he's got a nice mid-range. I think what a lot of people kind of can attribute maybe some of that hotness is, when you're young, things happen fast. And when things happen fast, you lose a little bit of your touch. But I think as you watch every game this year, you're going to watch that keep getting better and better because things are going to keep slowing down for him. He's going to be more familiar with how to game prep, what he's expected to see. So I do agree there's been some hot balls, but I do not think this is something where this is just going to keep being a problem. And I thought he played solid. I thought the offense played great. I thought it really felt like a Hawkeye-type victory. Well,
and I think key for you being the former quarterback, and you always got quarterback in your mind, hot footballs indeed. When you're talking about Tyler Goodson, sets up the play-action pass, opens up the offense. When Goodson can go like he did last week for over 100 yards and you're able to spread the ball around to other running backs, Charlie Jones, a couple of end arounds, a few different plays. I think when you look at that as a quarterback, either when you played or now as analyzing the game, you got to love that when the offense can give you 100-plus in a rusher, that's for sure.
I think a lot of people assume a quarterback just wants to throw the ball 40, 50 times a game and throw over 400 yards. But I don't know how it is everywhere else at Iowa. the running game is your friend. It makes throwing the ball so easy when we're doing it well. And when we're at our best, we do them both well. And I think that's exactly what we did on Saturday.
Well stated as always. James, we got in the last minute we have with you for this week, and you'll be back with us next week, of course. But I wanted to ask you, this is going to air after the Minnesota game, so you and I are really on the line here. We got to make our predictions, so the viewers are going to know the result. You and I will not. Again, full disclosure, viewers, we're recording this on Tuesday afternoon. What are your thoughts going into this Minnesota game? Did the Hawkeyes come away with a win and put a hole in that boat for PJ Fleck, or what happens?
Yeah, we're going to sink the boat Friday night. I like where we're headed going this week. I just think we turned the corner, and I don't think we were very far away those first 2 weeks. But like I said, at the very beginning, when we first started talking 4 or 5 weeks ago, the margin of error is slim. I mean, it's just you can't mess up. We made some mistakes those first 2 weeks. They cost us the game. Everything clicked on Saturday. Minnesota's a good team. I think PJ Fleck's got them definitely going in the right direction. It will not be easy, but I think we're pretty talented. Obviously, I know how well coached we are, and I just like us carrying that momentum into this week.
I agree with you 100%. And James, when you and I were chuckling on the air and now are off the air and now on the air, I did a couple of my radio shows earlier this morning and this afternoon, and it's interesting because that came up a bunch with my reporters was they got to sink the boat. You know, PJ Fleck's mantra, their viewers, row the boat. So I agree with you. I think the Hawks are going to sink that boat and move on to another victory and go 2-2, most importantly in the Big Ten, James. Look forward to catching up with you next week. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. He is James Vandenberg, former Hawkeye quarterback, and again, part of that CorridorInvestmentGroup.com, RBC Wealth Management. The quarterback, James Vandenberg, he is a business partner with Billy Happel Jr., former Hawkeye wide receiver. For James Vandenberg, I'm Dave O'Hara. We'll be back with more Hawkeyed with Jeff Horner talking some Iowa Hawkeye basketball, so stay tuned. Back with more in just a few moments.
Farming makes a positive difference in my life. I love to take care of the yards and the flowers in the garden, but I also like the opportunity that I have now that I can get in the combine and help when they need that. During the fall, one of the main things that I take care of is hauling grain to the elevator or hauling it here onto the farm and getting it in the bins. Women in general just have more opportunities that they can show their strengths today on the farm.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. And as you can see on the screen, always pleased to have this guy join us. He joins me on the radio side quite often as well. Again, DaveO'HaraSports.com or on social media at Dave O'Hara Sports. Jeff Horner, former Hawkeye great. Essentially, you look at any offensive statistical category in Iowa men's basketball history, Jeff is at or near the top of it. Former Mr. Iowa basketball from Mason City, Iowa Hawkeye. He was the MOP or MVP of the Big Ten tourney in the 05-06 season. And Jeff, first and foremost, as always, thanks so much for joining us going into year 3 as the head coach at Truman State in Kirksville, Missouri, my alma mater, formerly Northeast Missouri State. Jeff, how you doing, my friend?
Doing all right, hanging in there.
Hey, you're at your parents in Mason City. I know you mentioned, want to wish on the air here, best wishes to your son who had his tonsils taken out. Viewers, truly combat pay for my friend Jeff after going through his cancer scare this last year and beating back cancer and now taking care of his kids. But I know your wife and son and daughter are up there, and say hello to your parents. But thanks again for doing this, and all the best to your son who just went through surgery.
Oh, no problem. He's a trooper, so he's bouncing off the walls now. Took a steroid this morning, so we got to get him to calm down a little bit.
Well, with that tonsillectomy, he just wants ice cream, Jeff. You just get him that ice cream, he'll be happy. So
he's had enough of that already.
I'm sure he has. He's well earned. Well, let's do this, Jeff. Let's get to those Iowa Hawkeye men's basketball players this season. And man, you know, the polls came out in the AP. And again, full disclosure, viewers, we're recording this on Tuesday afternoon as it airs Friday night after that Hawkeyes big victory over Minnesota, hopefully. And I would ask you, Jeff, directly. On Monday's AP came out. Iowa was ranked number 5, Gonzaga number 1. That game on December 19th is looming ever larger. It was big anyway, but now it's been confirmed. We got a top 5 matchup in number 5 Iowa against number 1 Gonzaga. Give me some of your thoughts that you would go through as a coach right now, but if you were playing at Iowa at this time, if this matchup was happening during your playing days, I want to hear your thoughts on all that, please.
Oh, yeah. You know, I'd be super excited. You know, I remember when I committed to Iowa, I think at one point, Missouri and Iowa, I think were maybe like number 1 and number 5 or number 2 and number 5. And Iowa played Duke that year. And had they, you know, won a game, they would have been number 1. And, you know, so just seeing a matchup like that is just going to be extremely exciting to watch. But, in the same sense, as coaches, I think all coaches will pretty much tell you it's a nice honor to have those rankings, but in the same sense, I'd much always rather be the underdog, I guess you could say. But in saying that, I'm sure Coach McCaffrey says, the preseason rankings, they don't mean much. It's a nice compliment, but in the same sense, you have coming back with, you gotta produce on the court for sure.
Yeah, and they have so much coming back, as you and I talked about last week, and all Iowa fans know with Luka Garza, coming in as the preseason favorite to be the player of the year in college basketball this year. And you take a look at what's happening in and around the Big Ten, and you mentioned this, Jeff, last week, and no more truer could your words be than it comes out that Tom Izzo, the head coach at Michigan State, has coronavirus. And he said, I was doing everything. You're the example. You're the model as the coach, as you know. And he said, I don't even know where or how. And he goes, I'm just racking my brain. And he said, if I could ever figure it out. But you called it. You said it could be a battle of attrition, or teams are going to be playing well for a while, and then this happens. We've seen it in the NFL. We've seen it in Major League Baseball, and now in college football. Jeff, I think, unfortunately, you've really hit the nail on the head here.
Yeah, I just don't think there's going to be really any way around it. I think at some point, probably every team in the country is going to be quarantined at some point, or at least members of a team, depending on what your rule is as a conference or a school. But, like you said, it's going to have to be, people are going to have to try to stay away. You're going to have to be extremely disciplined on what you're doing. But in the same sense, like Tom Izzo saying, I don't know where I got it from. I think that's been, the fact of a lot of people probably just getting it. I've had a couple family members impacted by that. So it's definitely hard to stay away from it, because sometimes, like they said, you could be wearing a mask, you might still get it. And I'm not trying to say that masks don't work or anything like that, but, in the end, it doesn't, it's hard to tell what you can really do and what you can't do and that type of thing. And like you said, you got to stay away from things and as much as possible and just try to be disciplined and hope it works out in your favor.
And you and I have talked about this off the air on my radio show. Like you said with your players, you got to just say, and you hear players talking about this all the time in interviews, we got to be careful who we're around on campus. If we're on campus, we got to be careful going out if we go out. And it's just such a different time, Jeff, and I'm not trying to make it sound overwhelming, but even with your kids, as you mentioned, with going to virtual school, and now it's becoming, I don't want to overuse that word, but it's been overused, the new normal. But with your guys, you're telling them the same thing. So when we get to the court, in the expectations we talk about being at Iowa, as you and I have talked very in-depthly about, but as you take a look at the rest of the Big Ten season, the non-conference, Iowa, you and I talked about this last week, and I want to repeat this. They play North Carolina this year, and they're part of that ACC Big Ten shootout, and all these other big games. The Iowa State game is going to happen this year. They got a couple of tune-up games, we'll call them, and these MTEs, these multiple team events. Georgia Southern, I believe, is one of those teams, not a real basketball power. But I would ask you, in going into this, with only that 7-game non-con buildup and some huge games as we talk about Gonzaga, North Carolina, Iowa State, you've really got to be on the mark now, because like we saw in football, you're playing Big Ten games almost immediately.
Yeah, for sure. I also think it's one of those things where everybody has to go through that too as well. So everyone's kind of in the same boat. And I think that probably bringing back as many guys as what I was bringing back, they know what to expect already, which is probably a huge plus for them as to where if you have a young team or a lot of new transfers coming in, I think that's something that, obviously plays on the side of Iowa for sure. It could be like us at the D2 level where we're only playing conference games. And so every matchup, you don't have one tune-up game to get ready, but in saying that, Iowa's a veteran team. They're going to come out ready to play, and they all know each other really well, and they know how Coach McCaffrey coaches, that type of thing. So they know what to expect, and I'm pretty sure they'll be ready to go.
Speaking of your team at the D2 level, let's get there. Last year, you've told me this on the radio painstakingly, gone through this with me last week a little bit on this TV show, but you guys were on your way to nationals for the first time in almost 50 years at Northeast Missouri State / Truman, or even back in the day it was called Missouri State Teachers College. First time in a long time going to the national tournament. You tied for the regular season title in the GLVC, which is the Great Lakes Valley Conference. You won the tournament in a 53-52 barn burner, so you're going to nationals. You were a top 2 seed, I believe, and then you're on the way on the bus going through St. Louis from Kirksville on your way to Indianapolis. You get a text, and I'm going to let you take it away from there, please.
Yeah, we were on the bus, and unfortunately got a text that said the tournament was canceled, and it was kind of it was the day after the Big Ten tournament canceled, and we were actually heading to Indianapolis where the Big Ten tournament was. So I had a pretty good feeling it was going to get canceled. But I think Iowa was on the court last year when they found out at the Big Ten tournament that the Big Ten tournament was canceled. So it was one of those things where I just felt extremely bad for our seniors, especially a guy like Broderick Thomas, who was the player of the year in the league last year and did so many great things at Truman State, probably goes down as one of the top, arguably the best player to ever play there. So it was definitely hard for those guys to get that back, but we have a good group coming back, and hopefully we use that as motivation.
Jeff, you said good group coming back with Cade McKnight, and you've got Turner Scott coming back. So you've got some leadership and some good players. You've got a solid 4 or 5 of your top 6 guys, minus Broderick from last year. So looking forward to big things, I'm sure that you are, with your upperclassmen and returners.
For sure. We returned 4 out of our 5 starters, with Turner Scott at point guard, Hunter Straight at shooting guard, Alex McQuinn at the 4, and Cade McKnight at the 5. And we bring in a Division I transfer and Elijah Hayskamp from the University of North Dakota. So our lineup is going to be pretty good. We're going to be a little bit different, obviously, without Broderick. Elijah's more of just a kind of a really good shooter, not as big of a playmaker as Broderick is, but in the same sense, Cade McKnight is really good on the block. So surrounding him with more shooting is going to be big for us. We got some guys back coming up on the bench too that return this year. So we have a lot of experience too as well, and we're looking forward to it, and practices have been really good.
Looking forward to hearing from you all year long, Jeff, talking some Iowa Hawkeye basketball, Truman State Bulldogs basketball with you. Jeff Horner going into year 3 as the head coach at Truman State, again, former Iowa Hawkeye, great men's basketball player, still one of the statistical leaders in most meaningful categories in the men's program. Jeff, I will say this to you. Stay healthy. Have your family stay healthy. We look forward to catching up with you next week, as always. And I want to mention this, listeners, and Jeff, or viewers, if you're okay, we said this on the radio, and now we're going to say it on TV. We said it off the air. If you guys don't behave yourselves as viewers, Jeff's going to bring in some partners here on the air with us, and Adam Haluska and Greg Bruner may make an appearance. We may have a group Zoom cast here, so that could happen in the future, right, Jeff?
Yeah, we'll see what we can get done. So
I love it.
Kind of pesky, so.
I love it. Jeff, thanks so much. We'll talk to you next week, and again, good health to you and the family. Thank you, Jeff.
That's good. Thank you.
And that does it for this week's Hawkeyed with me, Dave O'Hara show. Thanks for tuning in. Also, thanks to Jeff Horner, James Vandenberg, David Eickholt, and of course, Joe Merschman. And thanks to you, the viewers. Also want to thank my sponsors and advertisers, my buddy Sean Holly at hollysshopformen.com. Also, my buddy Trey Emmerich at trimsbarbershop.com. And of course, my web administrator and website co-creator, Jamie Taylor at burrowdesigns.com or via social media at burrowdesigns. Like, subscribe, rate, review, share this. Also on YouTube and social media. Message me, Dave at daveoharasports.com. I'm going to pick a winner each month for giveaways from our sponsors and advertisers. For Hawkeyed with me, Dave O'Hara. Go Hawks! That's all from me. Thanks to all of you.
His hands were hard and stained with dirt from breaking ground. If a ship ever comes in, it's coming in and